The Abandoner. My alcoholic father tried to kill my sister and mother when I was in college. I was born into a strange family. My mother and father were married, but for most of my life, they lived in different houses and constantly fought when they were together in one house. In fact, I didn't grow up with them, growing up with my uncle instead. But when I turned 6, my parents started living together in the same house, and they called me over. It's just because that's when my little sister was born. My father was a great father. I remember when I was bored with studying, he'd sit with me and read through each page. And after we were done, we could go play outside, and he'd actually watch anime with me sometimes, which was hated by my Christian mother. So I liked him more than I liked my mother. But then I turned 15. Around this time, my parents started fighting a lot again, and I was old enough to notice my father kept coming home late. I defended him from my mother, and she really hated me for it. But then, turns out, he was actually cheating on her. This was complicated. I liked my father, and he was in the wrong here. I tried to talk to him, and I got through to him. He saw his wrong, and promised to not do it again. That's why I liked him so much. But he did it again. Again I spoke to him, and again he listened, and again he did it again. And now he was drinking more frequently and was prone to have anger tantrums. And then one day, I was sitting in my room trying to watch anime. I heard my father's voice coming from the kitchen, yelling at my sister. I fell asleep, and when I woke up, he was still yelling. And so I lost my temper too and went downstairs to stop him. He got so angry, he pushed me and grabbed my sister's arm, saying she was his daughter and he could do whatever he wanted with her. Then I pushed him off. By now, I'd grown taller than even him, so it was easy for me to do. But he was still surprised, and so was I. But I was sick of it. I was sick of hearing him yelling at my mother and my sister. I was sick of hearing him leave at night, not knowing if he was going to drink or his mistress. And I was sick of walking into my mother's room and seeing her hurriedly wipe her face and trying to act like it was normal. I told him this, and he didn't care. So, I warned him. If he ever yelled or touched my sister and mother again, I would break his nose. There was peace in the house, surprisingly. And a week after that, my mother came to my room and told me about the problem we were having with the electricity and the water bills. It was strange, but she was asking me what to do about it. Well, I started talking more with my mother, and she is actually so cool. She is funny with a rather dark sense of humor, and she is scared of the dark, even though she is old. My sister is the opposite. At school, she likes to hang out with me and my friends, even though she is a girl. She is very quiet, and she's the first girl I've ever seen who has been put in the friend zone by a guy she likes. I love them so much, and I was so sad when I had to leave for college. College was fun for the first few months, but then one day, as I was about to sleep, I got a call from my aunt. I said my mother was Christian, but she is nothing to my aunt. My aunt is the irritating, antagonistic type, and so she and I didn't get along, so I was surprised by the call. My aunt then told me that my sister had been calling her and sending her voice notes. My father was beating them back home. It got so bad that my mother left and tried to get the courts, but my father wouldn't let my little sister leave, and now my father was planning on leaving with my sister. I felt like a pile of dirt. I was out here having fun and partying, while back home, my mother and sister were suffering. And I know why they didn't tell me, because they knew I'd go back. Even after all they were going through, they worried about me. I called my mother and begged her to divorce my father, She agreed, but was too scared to go tell him herself. I told her I was going to meet her at our home, where my sister was. On that Saturday, I ran through the airport, and to my worst horror, the plane I was to board was going to leave later than planned. Even worse, when I got to Cincinnati, I couldn't find my bags at the luggage. By then, it was around 5 in the afternoon. My mother told me that she was going to the house at around 8 in the morning, and my sister hadn't known we were coming. Who knows what that dog got to do with them while I was out here. The thought just made me leave my bags there and hurry to my home. When I finally got to my home, I could hear screaming from the walk path. People were peeking out of their windows, and I just felt embarrassed. But then it dawned on me, I'm not the one who should feel embarrassed. It was him. So I yelled from there as loud as I could, calling my mother and my sister's name. The house immediately got silent. I called again, not giving a damn about the cars that passed. If they wanted to see what a failure of a man my father was, they could knock themselves out. This time, there was rumbling, and the door opened. My sister. Her cheek was purple and bruised. She ran as fast as she could to me and hugged me, crying. My sister. And my mother came to the doors too. The divorce was finalized last week. He apologized and promised he would never do it again, same way he had done a million times before. The driver. Well, I spotted a peeping Tom staring at my sister. So, I drove my sister to school last week, and when I got there, I couldn't help noticing one of the guys there, a guy that looked a little too old for school, following her. I didn't think much of it at the time, but then I found out I forgot to bring her lunch, so I went to school again, bringing her lunch, and gave it to one of the teachers there. When I was leaving, guess who I see walking around the school's gym area? When I called him, he turned and ran. By now, I knew that there was something going on here, so I waited in the car for the rest of the day until after school. The children came out, but my sister didn't come out. I went to look inside, looking through the grounds and the toilets and the classes, but no, she wasn't there. I found her teacher and she said she had been gone since break. I started panicking now. That man, where was he? I couldn't find him either. I was running to the car to call the cops, but when I got to my car, there she was. Turns out she was hanging out with some boy. I told Mom, of course, and she got in trouble, but I was still a bit embarrassed. It was quite the scare. Well, my sister tried to make me kill her mother, I think. Okay, so we might need a bit of a backstory for this one. The best place to start would be on who I was then. I was born in a farm, which tells you everything you need to know about my early childhood. Horse dung, country music, but no cowboy hats, sadly. I never went out much, since I preferred reading books, which took me to far places around the world and would only ever get time to talk to other kids when at church or school. Anyway, I turned 8 and my parents separate because of Daddy's temper. Then my father moves to a more developed place, let's say. There, he got a job and a new wife who had a daughter. My stepmother was a very quiet woman who was soft-spoken, so me and her were supposed to kick it off immediately. But for the first couple of years, we barely ever spoke to each other. She tried to talk to me and get to know me. She took me to school and always had me sitting at the front with her on the truck. She would go out and buy school clothes with me at the beginning of each year. I believe she was the first person to go out buying books with me, And I remember one night after dinner, she came to my single-windowed room, her eye black from dead, and asked about what I was reading. Terry Pratchett, I thought. But I didn't say it. I didn't open up to her. You know how children are, missing your real mother, your birth mother, and feeling like you were betraying her by letting in another one. So I kept my heart away from her and never let her in, no matter what she tried. This goal turned out to be easy to reach because of my new sister. My mother tried her best to get along with her daughter, but my sister was very special. Her and her mother used to live at the Big Apple, where they used to have buildings that cover the sky and cabs to pick them up anywhere in the streets, as she was fond of pointing out. And her father used to take her and her mother to school every morning, then take her mother to work. My dad didn't do that. I don't know why my mother married my father, but my stepsister had her theories. They amount to her mother is stupid. My stepsister must have failed about 3 grades by the time she was 13, and it was then that she started drinking a lot. My dad would have bitten her if he'd found out, but he passed on before he could. He wasn't a good person, but he was all I had, and when my stepmother didn't cry for him or seem that bothered by his passing, I must confess, I started to really hate her. Even though she took me with when moving to her new place in North Carolina. There, Rachel continued her drinking and even started doing drugs, though it was merely rumors. Until one day, as I was coming home from school, I caught her at the back of the school, doing stuff with one of the really rough boys. It was super awkward since we made eye contact, but I quickly walked home without saying anything. Rachel didn't come home until her mother started worrying. When I woke up the following morning, she was standing over my bed. I don't remember the specifics, but we spoke about the book that was on my desk, Prince of Thorns. Then she left. That was the first time me and her had truly spoken, and I got to know who she was. Later, she told me she wanted to ask if I'd spoken with Mom about what she'd done, but she chickened out. Well, after that, Rachel started being a bit braver, let's say. She brought her beers to the house and did her drugs in the house, brought her friends. Now that she spoke with me more, Rachel poured out her heart to me. Betrayal, abandonment, loneliness, these were the feelings she was always feeling, and a strong bitterness and hatred directed at her mother. I knew I should have told someone about Rachel's feelings, but at that time, I didn't love her mother either. So, I just let Rachel do everything she did to stress her mother. Maybe I even enjoyed it. But as time went on, Rachel started changing. Rachel, who was once loud and an extroverted girl, had started being more quiet, darker, and quick to anger. One who was once very good with people became easily irritable by them being around and didn't like interacting with them. She stopped going to school and started doing drugs. I don't know how many guys I saw walk in and out of her room, all with drugs. But through all this, her mother never said anything until Rachel bought a Satanist Bible. By then, she had already started scribbling Stars of David on the walls and cut 666 on her forearm. This new development finally broke her mother. A massive fight ensued in the house that could be heard throughout the neighborhood. It ended with Rachel running out of the house in a fit of rage. She didn't come back for another 3 days, in which time her mother must have lost some 100 pounds. She wouldn't leave bed or eat, and she didn't even go to work. She just only got up to go to the window and then back to her room. Watching that made me feel strange. I met Rachel at school on day 4 and asked her to come with me, and she agreed. I called her mother and told her, And she cried. She broke down, crying, and thanked me so much. I wish I could say I was stronger, but after dropping the phone, I couldn't clean my face. How could I have treated such a person so wrong? The only person in the world who ever looked at me. My father was not all I had. Sarah was. And when she needed me to be by her side, I failed her. I didn't know what to make of my feelings. Should I stand by her from here on out or not? But as I left for home, I saw her talking to somebody. One of her drug dealers, I assumed. He was leaned against his car and he seemed to reject her and drove off, while Rachel angrily yelled at him. When we got home, Rachel hurried to her room before her mother could go to her. Her mother tried to speak to her through the door for almost 4 hours before leaving. It is later that night, as I was sleeping, that I was woken up. Rachel was standing above me. We spoke again about some of my books. Then she asked me if I had any money on me, which I didn't. She looked as if she wanted to leave, just like the last time, but this time she stopped. She looked at me and asked, "Can you dig?" I was extremely confused, but I said yes. It seems simple enough. We spoke a bit more, and she told me the guy she was speaking to had a gun. She said she would get the money for it tomorrow. I didn't make any connection. Finally, we got to the elephant in her room, her mother. Rachel spoke of how annoying she was and how much of a headache she could be. Usually, I would pile my own words on how pathetic she was, but on that day, the thought made my stomach hurt. Then Rachel said, "Maybe it would be nice if she joined your dad, huh?" That made my blood run cold. I knew what I was expected to say, some kind of agreement, but I only mumbled, and Rachel laughed. She then said she was joking and quickly left. I think my face must have betrayed my true emotions. I didn't sleep that night. Rachel knew that I knew her plans, and I didn't approve. She could use the night to kill Sarah. I went out to sit at the lounge and turned the TV on, so that she could be scared to act. Then I started to wonder, what if she would decide to just come out and kill me too? The door from the rooms finally opened, and I hurried to the bathroom so I can see who it was. It was Sarah. She was standing outside Rachel's door, looking like she didn't know what to do. Under the white light of the morning, I finally made my decision. I would be by Sarah's side. I told her everything, and when I was done, she hugged me. I cried like a baby, apologizing for how I felt towards her, and she agreed to forgive me if I let her come with me when I go to buy another book. We started going to church with Rachel, and she doesn't talk about the same things anymore, at least not to my face.